Adaora's day began as it always did, with the rhythmic chaos of Lagos. She navigated through the sea of bustling commuters and the endless honking of danfos, finally arriving at St. Mary's General Hospital. The smell of antiseptic greeted her as she pushed open the doors to the emergency ward. It was another day of saving lives and dodging Dr. Bello's persistent advances. But today felt different. She first saw him at noon. A tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and a brooding aura walked into the hospital, cradling a small child whose face was drenched in blood. Adaora rushed forward without hesitation. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady as her hands moved to assess the boy. "Car accident," the man replied, his deep voice tinged with panic. "We need help now." "Follow me," Adaora instructed, leading him to the nearest treatment room. The boy's injuries were minor, a gash on the forehead and some bruising, but the man's concern was palpable. As Adaora stitched the wound, she noticed his eyes, dark and intense, scanning her every move. She finished the procedure, gave the boy a reassuring pat on the shoulder, and turned to the man. "He'll be fine," she said. "Just keep the wound clean and bring him back for a checkup in a week." The man exhaled heavily, relief washing over him. "Thank you. I'm Emeka," he said, offering his hand. "Adaora," she replied, shaking it. Their hands lingered for a moment longer than necessary. Over the next few weeks, Emeka became a familiar face at the hospital. He would visit under the guise of following up on the boy, who turned out to be his nephew, but his true intention was clear. He wanted to see her. Adaora, initially cautious, found herself drawn to his quiet strength and kind demeanor. Emeka wasn't like the boastful men who often pursued her. He was attentive, respectful, and deeply mysterious. One evening, as they shared suya and soft laughter at a roadside kiosk, he opened up about his life. "I lost my parents when I was a boy," Emeka said, staring at the flickering lantern on their table. "My aunt, Mama Ifioma, raised me. She's strict, but she's the only family I have." Adaora noticed the shadow that crossed his face when he mentioned Mama Ifioma, but she didn't press. Instead, she placed a hand on his. "You turn out pretty well," she said with a smile. That night, as she lay in bed, Adaora couldn't stop thinking about him. She had never felt this way before, so deeply connected, yet so unsure. The first red flag came 2 weeks later. Emeka had invited her to his apartment for dinner. The small but cozy flat was tucked away in a quiet part of Ikeja. They shared a delicious meal, laughed over old Nollywood films, and danced to Fela Kuti playing softly in the background. But as the clock struck 11, Emeka abruptly became distant. "I have to go," he said, his voice clipped. "Go? Where?" Adaora asked, confused. "Just something I need to take care of," he replied, avoiding her gaze. Before she could protest, he was gone, leaving her alone in the apartment. Adaora's mind raced. Who leaves their guest like this? She tried to brush it off, but her instincts told her something wasn't right. The strange behavior continued. Emeka would disappear for days without explanation, only to return with excuses that didn't quite add up. One night, as they walked along the crowded streets of Yoba, she decided to confront him. "Emeka, is there something you're not telling me?" she asked, stopping in her tracks. He froze, his jaw tightening. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "It's nothing," he finally said, forcing a smile. "You worry too much." But Adaora wasn't convinced. The turning point came when she visited his apartment unannounced. The door was unlocked, and the place was eerily silent. As she stepped inside, she noticed scratches on the walls, deep gouges that looked as though they had been made by claws. Her heart pounded as she moved further into the flat. She found a journal on the dining table, its pages filled with strange symbols and notes about the moon. What is this? She whispered to herself. Before she could process what she was seeing, the front door creaked open. Emeka stood in the doorway, his face pale. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice low and trembling. Emeka, what's going on? Adaora demanded, holding up the journal. What are you hiding from me? His eyes darted to the journal, then back to her. I can't explain, he said. You just have to trust me. But trust was the last thing Adaora felt as she left the apartment that night, her mind swirling with fear and unanswered questions. Adaora couldn't sleep. Her thoughts replayed the scene at Emeka's apartment, the scratches on the walls, the strange journal, and the haunted look in his eyes. Something was deeply wrong, and she needed answers. The next morning, she confided in her best friend, Tola, over cups of steaming oji and akara at their favorite roadside spot. Girl, this guy is giving me major red flags, Tola said, her brows furrowing. Scratches on the walls. A journal about the moon. Are you sure he's not into some dark juju? Adaora sighed. I don't know, Tola. He doesn't seem dangerous, but there's something he's hiding. I can feel it. Well, if you're determined to stay involved, you better tread carefully, Tola warned. Men like this can drag you into things you might not survive. That night, Adaora decided to confront Emeka one last time. She waited outside his apartment, watching as he returned home just before sunset. She followed him quietly, slipping inside after he left the door ajar. Emeka, we need to talk, she announced, stepping into the living room. He froze, visibly startled. Adaora, what are you doing here? You owe me the truth, she said, her voice trembling but firm. What's in that journal? Why are there claw marks on your walls? I can't keep pretending nothing is wrong. Emeka ran a hand through his hair, his expression anguished. You wouldn't understand, he said. It's too dangerous. Try me, Adaora insisted. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I'm cursed, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every full moon, I change into something monstrous. Adaora blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. What do you mean, change? You saw the scratches, he continued. That's me. Or the thing I become. I can't control it. It's been this way since I was a boy. My aunt, Mama Ifioma, she's the one who cursed me. Emeka explained everything. When his parents died in a mysterious fire, Mama Ifioma took him in. But instead of nurturing him, she bound him with dark magic, turning him into a creature that obeyed her every command. The curse ensured he would always return to her, no matter how far he strayed. Why would she do that? Adaora asked, horrified. She wanted control, Emeka said. She didn't want me to leave her. She's twisted, Adaora. And now, you've seen too much. Before Adaora could respond, the air in the room grew heavy, and the lights flickered. A chilling voice echoed from the shadows. You brought her into this, Emeka. Adaora turned to see an older woman emerge from the darkness. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her presence sent a wave of fear through Adaora's body. Mama Ifioma, Emeka said, his voice filled with dread. So, this is the girl who's been distracting you, Mama Ifioma said, her lips curling into a cruel smile. I warned you about forming attachments, didn't I? Adaora stepped back, her instinct screaming at her to run. But her feet felt rooted to the spot. Leave her out of this, Emeka pleaded. She doesn't know anything. Mama Ifioma laughed, a sound that sent chills down Adaora's spine. Oh, but she does now. And you know what that means. She raised her hand, and a dark mist began to swirl around her fingers. Before Adaora could react, she felt a crushing pressure on her chest. Emeka acted quickly. He grabbed a small vial of salt from his pocket and threw it at Mama Ifeoma. The salt exploded into a burst of light, causing the older woman to scream and stagger back. "Run!" Emeka shouted, grabbing Adaora's hand. They fled into the night, weaving through the crowded streets of Lagos. Emeka led her to an abandoned warehouse near the edge of town. Why did she do that? Adaora gasped, trying to catch her breath. She doesn't want anyone breaking the curse, Emeka explained. You're a threat to her control over me now. As he spoke, the moonlight streaming through a broken window caught his face, and Adaora noticed something terrifying. His eyes were changing. The whites were turning black, and his pupils glowed faintly. What's happening to you? She asked, backing away. It's the full moon, he said, his voice thick with pain. I'm losing control. Before Adaora could react, Emeka dropped to his knees, clutching his head as his body convulsed. His muscles bulged, his skin stretched, and his fingers elongated into claws. His screams turned into guttural growls, and within moments, the man she loved was gone, replaced by a hulking, wolf-like creature. Adaora froze in terror as the beast turned to face her. Its glowing eyes were filled with both rage and sorrow. Emeka, she whispered. The creature snarled but didn't move toward her. Instead, it clawed at the ground, as if fighting an internal battle. Suddenly, the warehouse door slammed open, and Mama Ifeoma stepped inside, flanked by two men carrying charms and machetes. You can't run from me, Emeka, she said, her voice dripping with malice. And neither can she. Adaora's heart raced as she realized she was trapped between the monstrous Emeka and the even more dangerous Mama Ifeoma. Adaora stood frozen, her heart pounding as Mama Ifeoma and her men advanced. The wolf-like Emeka growled, his claws scraping the concrete floor. The tension in the warehouse was palpable, and Adaora knew she had to act fast if she wanted to survive. Mama Ifeoma's glowing eyes locked onto Adaora. You've meddled enough, girl. Emeka belongs to me, and so does his curse. But since you're so eager to play hero, let's see how brave you are when he loses control. With a wave of her hand, Mama Ifeoma chanted something under her breath. Emeka roared in agony, his body convulsing as if the curse was tightening its grip on him. Stop! Adaora screamed, stepping forward. Why are you doing this? He's your family. Mama Ifeoma sneered. Family is loyalty, and Emeka has betrayed me by bringing you into this. He needs to learn that love is weakness. Adaora's mind raced. She couldn't fight Mama Ifeoma's magic, but maybe she could break her hold on Emeka. She remembered the journal she'd found in his apartment, filled with notes about the moon and strange symbols. One passage had stuck with her: the curse is strongest under the full moon but weakest in the face of true sacrifice. She stepped closer to Emeka, who was now snarling uncontrollably. His claws swiped at the air, but his glowing eyes flickered with recognition when they landed on her. Emeka, she whispered, her voice trembling. You can fight this. I know you can. The beast hesitated, its growl softening. But Mama Ifeoma laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the warehouse. You think love will save him? Foolish girl. His curse is bound to my will, and there's nothing you can do to change that. Adaora ignored her, focusing on Emeka. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on his fur-covered chest, feeling his racing heartbeat beneath her palm. I'm not afraid of you, she said softly. I see you, Emeka. The real you. And I'm not leaving. The beast roared, throwing its head back as if fighting an internal war. Adaora felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't back away. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering, You are not a monster. You're stronger than this curse. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for Emeka's ragged breathing. Then, something remarkable happened. The beast's claws retracted, and its glowing eyes dimmed. Slowly, Emeka began to shift back into his human form, collapsing to the ground in exhaustion. Mama Ifeoma's expression twisted in rage. No. This isn't possible. She raised her hands, summoning another wave of dark mist, but Adaora stepped between her and Emeka. You've controlled him long enough, Adaora said, her voice steady despite her fear. Whatever power you have, it ends here. Mama Ifeoma laughed bitterly. Do you really think you can stop me? With surprising speed, he lunged at Mama Ifeoma, knocking her to the ground. Her men rushed forward, but Adaora grabbed a metal rod from the floor and swung it with all her strength, forcing them back. Destroy the amulet. Emeka shouted, pointing to the pendant around Mama Ifeoma's neck. Adaora didn't hesitate. She darted forward, dodging a blast of dark energy from Mama Ifeoma's hand, and yanked the amulet free. It burned her palm, but she gritted her teeth and smashed it against the concrete floor. The pendant shattered into pieces, releasing a blinding light. Mama Ifeoma screamed, clutching her chest as the dark mist around her dissipated. When the light faded, Mama Ifeoma lay unconscious, her once glowing eyes now dull and lifeless. Her men fled, leaving Adaora and Emeka alone in the silent warehouse. Is it over? Adaora asked, her voice shaky. Emeka nodded weakly. The amulet was the source of her power. Without it, she can't control me anymore. Adaora helped him to his feet, her hands trembling. He looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, he said. You should have run when you had the chance. Adaora shook her head, tears filling her eyes. I wasn't going to leave you, Emeka. Not then, not ever. As they stepped out of the warehouse, the first rays of dawn painted the Lagos skyline. Emeka turned to Adaora, his expression solemn. The curse is broken, but there's still a part of me that will never be normal, he said. Are you sure you can live with that? Adaora smiled through her tears. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about standing by someone, even when it's hard. For the first time in years, Emeka felt hope. Together, they walked into the light, leaving the darkness behind.